Welcome back. This is the Restoration Republic podcast, and today we're going to talk about the corruption in LA, and we're going to dive a little deeper because we made some pretty bold claims the first episode, and I think my pops here is going to dive a little deeper into some of our experiences with the corruption going on around us. So.
Yeah. I made a comment about blatantly corrupt, but I want to dive into that. You know, what happened to us on the job site specifically for those corrupt subcontractors that we knew right away were shady, So one of the items that we knew right away is when a contractor submits a proposal, but it's got one lump sum and this kind of a paragraph without any breakdown. So that's kind of a red flag because you don't know where the numbers are. You don't know where the material is. You don't know where the labor is. So it's hard to understand where kind of what they're doing and where the money is being utilized the best. So a lot of times guys will overcharge for material. We'll say, hey, we want this area done with pavers or brick. We know the square footage,
right?
But they'll bring out 4 pallets of cobble or stone. Now we know that's way too much material. So one way they do it is they overcharge on material. And that's troublesome, obviously, because they try to, go at the owner for a material, but they're going to just really take that extra material, go back to the wholesaler, and then get that money back, or get it back for, maybe a 20% restocking fee, but they get that money back. So that's one way. Some of these subcontractors are playing games in the field. They'll overcharge on stone. They'll overcharge on windows, maybe have some extra windows on site. So there's all kinds of games they use on the material side.
And that's if they label in the billing, right? Like that's if they're overcharging for windows and we know what windows usually cost, like what the general cost is. A lot of subcontractors just bill and they bill as a general cost and they don't, like he was saying, they don't break it out. They don't specify where that money's going to. They just send a bill and it's a chunk of money and you have no idea what you're paying for. And a lot of the guys have nuts to do that, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
That they wouldn't think like, maybe if this was my money, I would like to see what I'm spending it on and where, like a normal receipt. But these guys just threw a lump sum and expect you to trust them, which obviously isn't going well in LA already. So it's just kind of wild that people can think like, this is fine.
So they do it with material. That's one kind of a sneaky thing they do. The other one is through labor, and they'll say, this job's going to take us, 5 men, and it's going to take 20 days. And then when all the smoke's cleared and the job's done, they got it done in a week, and they got it done with 2 guys, and those 5 guys never showed up. The 2 guys did,
right?
And you're like, you charged me for this labor rate, but it took you a lot less and a lot less time. That's really not fair, So.
Yeah. Well,
that's another way to hide.
One of the biggest examples on our job site was when we got a bill and we're kind of combing through the quote, and then all of a sudden we see a name that we usually meet everyone on the job site. That's our jobs as owners reps, to kind of get to know everyone, meet everyone, shake their hands, be friendly, to make the connection good between the owner and the subs. But we're going through the quote and we see a new name that we've never seen before, probably 6 months, 5 months into the project already. And apparently they've been charging us for, I don't know how long they were doing that, since we've gotten there, for a guy
that never showed up.
Didn't really exist on the site. We don't even know if this guy's real. We've never met him. He never showed up. It was just a complete stranger.
We thought to ourselves, man, we're terrible. We don't know the guy, that we never met this guy. How, we should go, find him. So obviously we dug in and found out that he was being used as a name, not on our jobs. And obviously not working our job site. And one invoice with that same name, he was on, there was 118 pages of an invoice. Now think about that,
right.
Combing through that. Well, in that monthly invoice we went through, we found his name twice in the same day.
How long did that take?
But think about that. His name was twice in the same day. So you pull the date up, you're like, he's got a twin. That is awesome. We never met the twin. But he got billed twice. And I want to say one time it was for 16 hours in one day. And on that same day, it was another 8 hours. Like, not only is there a twin, this guy is a grinder.
He works so hard. Worker.
Yeah, gets there before us, leaves after us. So that's another way so that they'll do these lengthy billing processes. And that's the way some of these GCs and subs will do, 10 to 20 pages of backup and invoices. And an owner doesn't know how to navigate that, or how to comb through that and say, hey, this doesn't seem right to me. Hey, time out. I want to see if you overbilled me here. So
Well,
that's
yeah,
another way.
going back to it, they don't know what everything costs, right? Like for you, like you were a carpenter and I was an electrician, right? So for us, we can kind of guesstimate like, okay, for this electrical run, we can see that it's only a few $1,000s and not $10,000, right? For the people who weren't in the trades that long, and I was only in there for 2 years, but I kind of have a general understanding, it gets confusing for the owners, right? Because they don't know what they're looking at.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to go back to on the guys on the site, what's really interesting is obviously we know in the country that there's a lot of illegal aliens working in the trades. They really prop up the country. But what they do, because they kind of don't want to get caught, from what I'm understanding, maybe you have a better understanding, but what they do is they use multiple names, right? And so one bill, it's Juan Carlos, and on the next, I mean, they just
Yeah.
use a whole Hernandez, but it's the same guy. But they do that to try and throw, I don't know, government or ICE off their track. But they do that to kind of confuse. They'll never use their real name. I realized that once I started getting to know everyone, right? I would hear them. I would talk to Hernandez, right? And then all the other workers would call him by another name all the time. And I would ask, I'd be like, why are you calling Hernandez Juan? That's just his nickname. But they'll do that with everyone, and they always use fake names. So on top of the confusion already with the billing and fake guys being there and twins working 16 to 18 hours a day, which is impossible, you have all these guys using fake identities, and it's such a crapshoot. It's crazy.
Yeah. At the end of the day, look, what does a homeowner want? They want, work done at a fair rate. They want to not be taken advantage of. They want quality work. And maybe they don't need to get into all the nuances of what we deal with, but our job is, we're passionate about it. We don't like unfairness. We don't like abuse. We don't like people trying to pull the wool over someone's eyes, because we've seen it too much. It's irritating. It's disrespectful. So we go out of our way to make sure we know everyone on site. We're friendly with them. We buy them donuts. Sometimes we hang out with them. Sometimes outside of work, they're really good people. But at the end of the day, we have to know the job better than the GC, better than the architect,
Better than the owner.
and then therefore we know what the fair rate should be. We know when there's abuse. We know when someone's trying to come in and play games, and we root them out fast. And it's done either through overcharging material, labor buildup that's not fair. And then sometimes it's just blatant overbilling. Sometimes they'll say, hey, this linear, we talked about
Tell
before.
the story of the wall.
Yeah.
The Great Wall of Topanga, or what do they call it? What'd you call it? Topanga or
Great Wall of Mandeville.
Mandeville.
Yeah, which we're getting a little specific, so I want to be careful.
Sorry.
Long story short is, there is a radius retaining wall that probably in its total length was 10 feet. And a long time ago, I owned a framing concrete company, so I already ran the numbers, knew what the costs were, the material costs were, and we got this cost in from this individual, and it was $148,000 for 10 feet. We're like, whoo, I think he probably saw something we didn't see, and maybe he's ripping down the entire backyard.
It wasn't even 10. So for a radius wall, was it 10 feet?
Yeah, it's 10 feet. It was almost
Barely.
9.5 or 10
It was
feet.
like 9.5, 10 feet, a small wall that only goes up 5 feet.
Yeah.
It was, and they charged, what was the number?
148,000. And
awesome.
and I was like, hey, do you guys want to check these numbers? And they got upset and said, absolutely not. This is an accurate number.
Which is wild.
And I said, if I submit this to an owner, not only will I tell them that that's not an actual number, and I'll give them the real number, which I already had. I said, but it's going to put you in a very bad light with the owner. And there's only one really conclusion after that. You're trying to, take advantage of a situation, and you're going to get fired. So again, we're as owner reps, we're put in those situations where we have to step in for the owner to not only navigate construction drawings, to comb through invoices, to have uncomfortable conversations with subcontractors that have the audacity to try to cheat an owner, and we step in. And we step in and say, no, we can do it, and we can do this nice, we can do it rough. How do you want to do it? But you're not going to do this to the owner. You're not going to do it on our watch, and you're not going to be on our job site as of tomorrow. Pack your stuff away. So that's kind of part of what we do. I made a comment about 15 subcontractors in a video and 5 of them being blatantly corrupt. I wanted to kind of dive into that, and that's what we're talking about, how they're blatantly corrupt. But some are just really brazen and just throw swag, big numbers out there, and they still don't care if it's a high number because they're busy and they can charge that. But a savvy owner, and I used that term before, but would be wise to do a deep dive and have an owner's rep or someone that's been a builder, friend, GC say, does this number make sense? I've got 2 other numbers. Why am I getting this number? So.
Yeah, that's just crazy, all the corruption. I think it's awesome. I love how we ran into the people. I just think that's hilarious, or how they would, and like, the funny thing is you have to think about when they're billing the owner, they know that the owner won't go through it. That's why they put those, they double up on the hours, they double up on the men. They have the audacity to think these guys will never look at it. And they won't understand what it means because owners aren't meeting everyone. They don't know the workers. So I just think it's interesting.
They're not going through 118 pages, and that's what it was monthly from this one individual.
It's like contracts.
That's like a lawyer's. It's like diving. Are you kidding me? Like, who's gonna 118 pages? Like,
yeah.
What?
No one would read that, and with vocabulary that not many people on this planet understand. Like, for a law, I couldn't dive into a contract, a 200-page contract, right? We would need an attorney, just like you need an owner's rep, right? Yeah. It's a whole nother language out there, and it's so easy to get lost in, especially in the LA area. And I think that that's such a big problem for all these people because there's a lot of good people who are losing a lot of money and they have no idea about it. Right?
Amen. And I think like we've talked about before, if you're going to spend money on an owner's rep, and by the way, it can be 3 to 5% of the general bill. If it's $10 million, it's 3 to 5% of that. But a good one will get ahead of and meet with the architect and say, hey, walk me through your progress. Are you 20%? Are you 30%? And it's what's complete. And at one point, they're going to start really breaking down the design that's approved and go, great, now let's get this into a buildable set. Part of that buildable set is layering it with electrical, mechanical, plumbing, and then creating construction drawings for all the details. And that's where I think architects get lazy. They almost shop that out. They'll say, hey, I'm the designer. I'm this big name. I'm gonna design this thing, amazing project that's gonna oversee LA, part of the ocean. And then I'm gonna shop out, or I'm gonna sub out the construction part. They can shop that out or try to save some money on a draftsman. And what happens is they'll get files sent to that draftsman, try to attach it to this and package something to get to the city. But usually it's lacking. And I would say probably, I'm gonna say this number, but probably 80% of the plans I've seen out there are wrought with incompletion. They're not complete plans. And all that does is you'll see a GC put a number together and go, okay, I've got my demo number, that makes sense, survey demo number, my mobilization number, got this, concrete framing, but gosh, what's this allowance? Now I have another allowance. What's this budget? And these are swag numbers that they put together knowing that you're signing a contract and they've already built in some profit in these allowances. And it's an opportunity for the GC because the plans weren't done in completion, in the totality. And no one sat down with this architect saying, time out, I'm not paying you until I see a full set signed off by an owner's rep or somebody else saying, yeah, that's a buildable set. I can bid off that. Then you take it to 3 GCs and you navigate who's got the best number understanding of this project. And now who's got the best schedule? Who's gonna commit a full crew to my job site? Who's got 20 jobs and who's got 5? Who's really gonna do a good job? So there's a little bit of navigation.
Oh, I have a question for myself and for the people watching. Do you think that this level of corruption, and maybe I already asked this question in the last video, but do you think this level of corruption existed back when you had your old companies back in 2008, 2005?
I do. I do think it was there. I don't think it. I think it has definitely increased. That's a really good question because I'm trying to think back in the days. I'm like 100 years old. Like, what was it like back then when we had horse buggies and stuff? People like did things on handshakes, and it was a different world. It doesn't mean that there was bad contractors, but I think there's a lot more shady contractors today. So I think it has gotten worse. I'm kind of processing as you asked the question, but I think it has gotten worse because obviously there's so much construction, there's so much going on, and all they gotta do is take a test, right, to get a license and say I'm a GC, and then put a website together through AI and throw some homes on it and go, yeah, we've done that. What did you do with it? Now the owner doesn't know that all they did was they built a deck on the back
Right.
of this $60 million mansion. Like, yeah, we built this house. And so I think there's a lot of smoke and mirrors with these GCs. So referrals are key, right? To say who in the business is up there. But even those guys, like I know some key guys right now in Beverly Hills, and top names that I'm not going to mention, that you could probably put them in the top 3 builders of Beverly Hills, all that area at there, Brentwood. And I know one of them specifically builds his business on change orders,
Yeah.
which means they'll say, yeah, we'll do it for 4%. That's our fee. We're not making much, all open book. But what they do is they base that 4% growing to 12.
I think a lot of companies do that. I think a lot of companies try and get the lowest deal because you have to bid a project, right? And so you would bid it at a really low price and you're not making really anything. And when the change orders come in, when you say, oh, you want to do something different? Well, that's going to cost this much, right? And it's a whole nother money amount that they get to charge, and they keep doing that and doing that. And that's every job site's going to have change orders. There's not a doubt.
Well, there's two categories. There's a change order driven by the owner, which is fair.
Right.
I really don't like that window in that location. I need it bigger, and I want it to open up to the backyard and slide out. It's a small window. I don't like that design. That's an owner change order. That's a legitimate change order. Then there's the change orders that the GC already knows about. How does he know about it already? Well, he's combed through the plans, and he knows that he's got a ton of exclusions. So that's another kind of red flag on that proposal that the owner gets and goes, gosh, it's $55,000, but what is this? Exclusion, exclusion, exclusion. I've got 16 exclusions. And so what are those exclusions? That's really what I look at. First thing I look at when I see a subcontract, I don't even look at the number. That's the truth. When I'm looking for the owner, what I go to right away, I go to the bottom and find out what are they excluding. Sometimes it says excavation. Sometimes it's compaction. They're not putting their dirt back. Sometimes debris removal. Sometimes it's inspections. Sometimes it's soil inspection. Sometimes it goes on and on and on. So there's different exclusions that all they do, it creates an avenue or a loophole for a subcontractor to say, man, this owner is not even that aware of it. So once again, I tell people, get an owner's rep. Get someone that can play in the middle and call out a job before it gets on the tracks, or gets off the tracks, I should say. I think our time is better spent, or there's more value in getting us early on a job site,
Right.
with an architect. And I'm talking only when he's 10, 20% on his design.
First 90 days are the most important of the site.
Critical, but I'm saying even on the pre-construction of the design, saying, hey, you know what? Remember how they're showing you this design? Well, don't we have to cantilever all that stuff? And don't we have to add a retaining wall? And does he know his setbacks? And do they give you a budget on that retaining wall? And they'll say, yeah, they give us an allowance. And I'll say, but do we really have a concrete guy that is structural concrete, like a great one we know,
Right.
saying, can you get a number there? So I think there's a story to tell for why is it important for an owner's rep to get on even before a spade's in the ground.
Let me ask you this. Why do you think there is more corruption now? Because I agree with you. I think there is more now than there were back then. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think a lot of things are different. I mean, it's not just construction. I think that back in the day, when someone looked in your eye and shook your hand, talk about our grandpas and stuff. If they told you something, it meant something, right? Hey, I'm going to get this done. I'll show up at this time. And they did it. But I think that's more of a cultural thing that's changed. And I think it's crept into everything. It's not just construction, right? It's from the car mechanics to it's the shadiness of the world we're in. It's just the reality. And so I think it's everywhere, but there's very few guys, and they're out there, by the way, still, because we met some old school guys that sometimes don't even give you a quote. I'll do it for this. And you can dog them all you want. They don't even know what a computer is. And they show up with a crew, and it's the best work you've ever seen.
Yep.
And then you beg them for billing, and I'll bill you later. And it's 60 days later, then yeah, can I get that check? They're classy, they're old school. They do what they say. Those guys are dime a dozen.
They're not
dime a
greedy.
dozen. They're few and far between, excuse me.
The biggest thing I would say with the corruption nowadays, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's two big things, knowledge and experience. Everyone can get the knowledge from courses online, from testing every day, from studying from the test, right? And many people pass that test who probably shouldn't pass that test. And they have the knowledge, but they don't have the experience. And so where I think a lot of this corruption is coming from is from guys when they come across a problem and they don't know necessarily how to do it because they've never been in this zone, right? And so maybe they cover up, maybe they lie and say, it'll be done in a week, or we're way ahead schedule, right? And they're 3 weeks behind schedule, right? So I think a lot of the corruption comes from young, greedy, power-hungry guys who probably weren't raised under one of our, dime of a dozen construction workers. And I think that's just going to increase because we have more and more and more people coming in. And I think people are realizing that the trades, that's going to be the future millionaires. That's where the millions are going to be. So I think that's going to be a real issue in the future if people don't start kind of waking up a little bit.
Yeah, I think there's enough horror stories out there where people now are like, man, I had a bad construction. I told you before, I said this in a different video, I said, there's a lot of distrust in the construction community, and there just is. And guys have taken deposits and left. Guys have not performed and done a job halfway and left. Guys have done bad work. To your point, they didn't know what they were doing, but they faked it and said, we can do it, right? So you have to navigate who's good out there, who can do what they say, who's got a referral base, and even the good guys screw up. So now we take the good guys, right? And even the good guys someone gets sick on their job site. They got the wrong gauge of metal up on the roof, and we have to say, hey, but they fix it right away. They do what they say. They don't nickel and dime you.
They cover the cost.
They cover the cost, but even the good guys have to be kind of watched. But at least that's a different group of subcontractors that have the moral compass to say, yeah, you know what? We're going to do what we said. It's important to the owner. We're going to stand behind it. But in our experience, it's probably a third of what we dealt with, right? A third of the subs are good. The rest are not good. I was going to say third being good. Yeah. A third being really quality people. And some that we like, man, these are good dudes. These are just good humans, and they've learned the hard way, but they're just great people to know long term. So we want to drag them to the next job, depending on their availability.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
So